I'm only going to tackle one chapter in this week, the eighth week, and then tackle one chapter in the ninth week, and then I'll tackle the last two chapters in the 10th week. One of the things that you need to remember or to think about is that you can't start counseling until you've turned in your history. So you need to create a history with a select problem. The papers are also due, so get those in as soon as you possibly can. You need to have them in by the 10th week. Right now I've got five, it's almost six. So this is something to think about. You've got to get those things in. You can't complete the class unless you have a history. You need a character for other people to counsel, and that's part of the class. So get them in. Um, I One of the things about counseling, not everybody can do it. Not everybody likes doing it. So one of the reasons that we're practicing counseling is so that you can find out if this is something you want to do or something you don't want to do. Um, there's lots of things you can do in psychology without being a counselor. Uh, and this is what this class is all about. So if you want to go a different direction than counseling, that's fine. But I need you to try out counseling in this manner. Uh, so so get them in, or you can't possibly pass the class without doing the 10 counseling sessions. That's 10 times 10. That's 100 points. The history is the character history is another 50 points, and the paper is of course another 100 points, and that's 250 points out of 500. So without counseling and without trying this out, you can't possibly pass the class. So let's go ahead and get started today. We're going to talk about identifying key problems or challenges. Understanding the client's problems. This can be complicated. This is really complicated. Diagnosing someone, sometimes their problems will change while you're counseling them over time. Their problems will change. Uh, Sometimes new problems will arise in their lives, and sometimes the problem that they came in for will be taken care of, and that will disclose another problem that they've had that has been hiding behind this other problem. So it's really quite complicated, and you need to try to understand what they're talking about. The process of coming to an agreement on problems and goals involves a thoughtful and complete assessment. It is important to work on what the client is ready to solve, not what the practitioner might think is important. And this is really important because it's the client that has the problem. So it is your job to take care of whatever problem they present to you. Not it's not you, it's them. So they're the ones that dictate what's happening next. What is the extent of your problem? How is the problem affecting your life? How long has this problem been in existence? How frequently does this problem happen and how bad does it get? What is the cause of your problem? Are you living in an environment that will allow the problem to return? This is a really common problem. If you're living in an environment where everybody drinks and you're trying to get off the bottle, uh, you may have to leave the environment in order to recover from your problem. And this is not that uncommon. If you live with an in-law that is very negative, and you're having a problem with depression, you may have to get away from that relative in order to get rid of your depression. So this is relatively common. Is the problem worse because you haven't dealt with it? And usually that is the way that the world works. A lot of times we just let things ride, hoping that they'll go away, and so very frequently they don't. Is this a superficial problem or one that gets deeper requiring extensive therapy? And of course, that's something that you'll have to deal with as well. How urgent is it that the problem be solved? Is it possible that this problem is the symptom of a more serious problem? And of course, that's what you're always looking for. Looks like she's got a bracelet of Fruit Loops. Considerations of any problem include financial remuneration, client time constraints, and practitioner time constraints. Wait a minute. Let's go back to this. Financial remuneration has to do with can they pay for the therapy. Client time constraints. How busy are they? Are they working an 8-hour day? Do they have? Can they only come in on Fridays? You know, they have time constraints. Of course, you've got a schedule that you have to maintain. Do you have room for them in your schedule? And that's usually the biggest problem. Counseling, there aren't enough counselors out there, and they tend to fill up fairly quickly, their time slots. The practitioner might have to act without fully exploring all problems due to crisis status. Sometimes you just need to deal with the problem without really getting into it very well, and that's because they're in crisis. The immediate crisis situation will have to be dealt with first before you can address other problems. They may come in. Well, let me explain my great niece when uh, when she was having a psychotic episode with her bipolar disorder. She was also a drug addict, and she was also pregnant. So the crisis that she came in with was the fact that she was having a psychotic episode. So before they could do anything else, before they could deal with her drug abuse, before they could address her pregnancy, the first thing they needed to do was get her over her psychotic crisis. The practitioner may have to be more directive. And of course, that's one of the things. Um, Counselors tend to not tell people what to do. They want the only way that the person is going to actually help themselves is by helping themselves. And for this reason, you try to get them to say what they're going to do, not you tell them what to do. But in a crisis situation, sometimes you have to be quite directive. Crisis situations dealing with interpersonal violence would include murder. Crisis situations dealing with interpersonal violence would include rape. Crisis situations dealing with interpersonal violence would include terrorist bombings. Crisis situations dealing with major natural disasters would include floods. Crisis situations dealing with major natural disasters would include tornadoes. You guys really don't have to worry about floods too much, I guess, flash floods. And tornadoes, not that often in your area, but I used to live in Oklahoma and Nebraska. Where else did I live? Northern Texas in the Panhandle, just below the Panhandle. We used to have tornadoes all the time, but not so much in the desert. Crisis situations dealing with major natural disasters would include fires. Everybody has fires. Crisis situations dealing with that major natural disasters would include hurricanes, which you really don't have to worry about on the reservation in Arizona. I don't really have to worry about hurricanes in Iowa, except we had that derecho a couple of years ago where we had hurricane force winds that blew down all of our trees. Crisis situations dealing with personal loss would include unexpected death of a family member. Crisis situations dealing with personal loss would include sudden abandonment of a significant other. It is important to stay calm and remember that safety is the first priority. A lot of people can't handle crisis situations. They don't even think about it. It's never occurred to them. But having worked in the emergency room, we're dealing with crises on a minute by minute basis. And some people can handle it and some people can't. So this is one of the things that you need to think about. I'm sure in your life you have dealt with some fairly negative situations, and of course this is something that we all have to determine. Working in the emergency room, I can remember some of the best doctors in the world are emergency room doctors, but we had people that studied to be emergency room doctors came in the first night and they just folded up like a house of cards. They couldn't handle it. Some people can handle it, and some people can't. It's just like being in a combat situation. You never know whether you're going to stand up and do what you need to do, or whether you're going to hunker down and try to hide. Use skills of listening, asking questions for clarification, express empathy and warmth. Not so easy when everybody's screaming around you. Your job is to keep everybody as calm as possible. Seek supervision as soon as possible. And there you go. Clients do not see any need to make a change. Working with the clients, we're talking about the pre-contemplation stage. The clients don't see any need to make a change. They do not see their behaviors or feelings as problems. They blame others for their problem. This is so common. You wouldn't believe how little people actually see themselves as having a problem. Moving from something clients cannot change to something they can improves efficacy. Empathy about problems that are out of the client's control is necessary. If the client states that her boss is unfair to her, the practitioner might see her part of the problem as her inability to figure out what she can do to be treated more fairly. The practitioner isn't denying that the client has a problem, merely pointing out that the portion of the problem that the client can't control. You can only control what you can control, and you can't control other people. If the client states that the problem is the city's failure to adequately maintain their neighborhood, the practitioner might help the clients to see their part of the problem as their lack of information about how to effectively lobby for services. If a mother is upset because her son is doing poorly in school and wants to make him bring up his grades, the practitioner will accept this as a valid concern and work with the mother to figure out what she wants to change about herself. The mother may be focusing too much on what the child is not doing or may not have encouraged him. She may not have discussed the problem with his teachers. If the client is a young single mother of 3 children who states that she doesn't have enough money for food and housing, even though she works full time, the practitioner can work with her on her desire for more income so that she can better provide for her family and can tell her about whatever additional resources might be available to help her provide for her family. Motivational interviewing can be very helpful. Motivational interviewing is client-centered counseling that helps clients increase motivation by assisting them in exploring and resolving ambivalence about making changes. And we're still in the pre-contemplation stage. Rolling with resistance, clients have valid insights and ideas about their situation. Arguments for change are avoided by clients. The practitioner indicates a willingness to work on the problem identified by the client. Resistance often arises when the client is required to see the practitioner. A motivational interviewing strategy that involves pointing out an incongruity between the client's present behavior and something that they value or they want. What are we talking about? We're still talking about rolling with resistance. So this may increase clients' motivation to change. The goal is to move the client to contemplating that there is a problem that they can work on. And of course, that this is the biggest problem, is getting them to admit that they actually have a problem. Identifying discrepancies, a motivational interviewing strategy that involves pointing out an incongruity between the client's present behavior and something they value or want. This may increase a client's motivation to change. The goal is to move the client to contemplating that there is a problem that they can work on. There is a readiness to believe that there is a problem. This is the contemplation stage. Oh, finally, we've convinced them that there is a problem, and now they're ready to at least admit that they have a problem. The client can acknowledge the advantages of changing, but is also aware of the costs. So if my problem is that I drink too much, maybe I do drink too much, but what are my costs? I'm going to lose all my friends because I only have friends because they like me when I'm drunk. You need to express empathy to them. It's important at all stages of change to express empathy, to show that you understand what they're going through. You have an idea of what they're going through. This provides acceptance. I know that you know that your drinking is a problem, but right now stopping seems impossible. This is part of the contemplation stage. Wow, that's a lot of beers. I understand that you think that it would improve your health if you gave up smoking, but that giving up smoking feels almost impossible. So part of the contemplation stage is advanced reflecting. Client's perspective is essential. You need to show them that you understand what they're talking about. Identifying values, meanings, feelings, and expectations. Expressions need to be stated tentatively. The purpose is to invite the client to have insight, self-awareness, and or a deeper understanding of his or her situation. It seems like you feel angry because you value communication and he doesn't. You have moved from focusing on the client's husband to identifying what the client values. They value communication. You're not mentioning the husband because that's something you can't control, but you can control the fact that this individual is looking for communication. They value communication. It sounds like you feel angry because you expect clear directions from your boss. Without clear directions, you feel afraid of making mistakes. You've moved from focusing on the boss to focusing on the client's need for clarification. It seems like you value open communication and haven't found a way to invite other members of this group to share openly. Moving from focusing on what the client thinks is wrong with the other group members to focusing on what the client values. Once again, it's communication. I hear that you are frustrated and think this group isn't accomplishing enough. It seems like you really want this task group to do well. Moving from focusing on what the client is frustrated about and what the client wants. It seems that several folks in this agency are feeling impatient because the needs of the growing Hispanic population are not being adequately addressed by the agency. It sounds like addressing the needs of the Hispanic population is something many of you value and think is important. Moving from focusing on what is wrong with the services at the agency to what the people in the agency value. I'm wondering if you feel like you aren't getting much recognition at work. Being valued for your contributions seems to be important to your job satisfaction. Moving from what the people at work aren't giving the client to what the client wants. I have the feeling that the group really wants to deal with this issue, but you are afraid of hurting one another's feelings. Moving from what the group members are afraid to do to what they want. It seems like you folks in the neighborhood really want to get this problem solved, but are feeling pretty discouraged right now because the process seems difficult, moving from how hard the process is to what the people want. Themes may be related to interacting, behaving, thinking, and or feeling. Seeing patterns can help clients to make changes. A theme is an idea or a point of view shared by several people. A pattern refers to consistent ways of thinking, feeling, or behaving. Themes may be related to interacting, behaving, thinking, and feeling. I just said that. Oh, I see. A pattern might be related to how a client tries to escape, run away, or use some self-defeating behavior. Practitioner can ask about possible connections between problems and thoughts, feelings, ways of coping, and other situations. It is particularly powerful to relate themes and patterns to clients' experience of what is happening in his or her relationship with the practitioner. Clients can begin to identify their roles and problems and begin to set goals. It is important to state and restate goals until both client and practitioner are clear about them. Partializing involves breaking a complex problem into its manageable parts. Partializing. Practitioner and client can decide which parts of the problem should be dealt with first. This may be the easiest, the most painful, or one that can lead to the solvability of other aspects of the larger problem. It is important to remember that a client's perception of what is manageable may be smaller than or different than the practitioner might see as possible. Preparation stage, supporting self-efficacy. Encouragement given to the clients that you can solve problems. The goal is to enhance clients' confidence and capability to cope. Statements that recognize what the clients have already accomplished and identifies their strengths can support their belief in themselves. Problem identification concerns aiding the clients identifying problems clearly. In larger systems and families, different members may understand problems differently. You could probably identify with that if you if you live with anybody else. Nobody, two different people will not identify things the same. Clients often think of problems as something to stop. They need to change to what they want to start doing, not what they need to stop. They need to stop thinking of their problems in a negative fashion. They need to start thinking of solutions, and solutions are a positive, not a negative. Ethical considerations and problem identification. Practitioners need to support essential ethical principles related to autonomy and self-determination. Client decisions are influenced by culture, gender, age, and other factors. The practitioner's role is to support choices of clients even if they feel they should make other choices. And that is the end of that. Let me remind you once again that you need to get your histories in if you haven't done it thus far. You need to get your character histories in. You need to create a character so that you can someone can counsel you. And of course, once they counsel you, you can counsel them. And that is what we need to get done. So I will talk to you next week. We'll tackle chapter 12, I think. This was chapter 12. We'll tackle chapter 13 next week.